All right, let's dive in. Today we're basically opening up a field guide for spotting leadership out in the wild. We're going to look at the big picture visionaries, the get-it-done implementers, and even the chameleons who can adapt to pretty much anything. It's time to learn how to identify these leaders in their natural habitat, the workplace.
So let's start with the million-dollar question. What really makes someone a leader? When I say that word, do you immediately picture someone with a corner office and a fancy title? I mean, that's what we're often told, right? That leadership is all about being the boss. But the truth is, it's so much more interesting than that.
Because at its very core, leadership isn't a position, it's a process. It's all about influencing, motivating, and, this is the really crucial part, enabling other people to do great work. A real leader is an enabler. They're the ones clearing the path, getting rid of obstacles, and empowering their team to contribute to the big picture.
And that idea naturally leads to something pretty powerful, this concept of shared leadership. It's the view that leadership is a role anyone can step into, not a permanent position for just one person. And you really see this take off in collaborative teams where the formal boss is actually willing to delegate power. It's about employees leading each other when the moment calls for it.
Okay, first up in our field guide, the visionary. You might also hear this type called a transformational leader. This is the person who isn't just managing the day-to-day. No, they're painting this incredibly vivid picture of a better future and inspiring everyone around them to help make it a reality. So how exactly do they pull that off? Well, it's not magic. This model right here basically gives us the blueprint. Transformational leadership is really a set of 4 key behaviors that all work together to build some serious momentum. Let's break down what those are.
First, they have to develop and communicate that vision. And they don't do it with a boring spreadsheet. They use stories, metaphors, and symbols to create a real, emotional connection to where the team is going. And then, and this is so important, they model it. They actually walk the talk. Their daily actions reflect the vision, which is what builds trust and makes the whole thing feel legitimate.
So once the vision is clear and they're living it, they have to make it achievable. They do this by encouraging experimentation, by challenging the old ways of doing things and creating a safe space for learning. And finally, they build commitment. They use rewards, recognition, and celebrations to keep everyone energized and rallied around that shared goal.
Now, a quick but really important distinction here. Transformational is not the same thing as charismatic. Charismatic is more of a personal trait, a kind of magnetism that can sometimes create followers who are dependent on the leader. But transformational leadership, that's a set of behaviors anyone can learn, and its goal is to empower followers, not make them dependent. It's all about lifting others up.
All right, let's move on to the next type in our guide, the implementer. So, while the visionary is looking way off into the future, the implementer is focused on getting things done right here, right now. They're all about supporting and guiding the team through the day-to-day. This is the world of managerial leadership.
And listen, this isn't about one style being better than the other. You absolutely need both. Transformational leadership is the big picture, change-oriented stuff. Managerial leadership is the micro-level, stability-focused work. Honestly, they're like 2 sides of the same coin. And any healthy organization needs a good balance of both to survive and thrive.
Now, if we look closer at managerial leadership, you can really break it down into 2 main flavors. You've got your task-oriented leaders who focus on the what, assigning work, setting goals, planning. Then you have your people-oriented leaders who focus on the who, showing concern, recognizing good work, and just making the workplace a decent place to be. The best managers, they're masters of both.
You know, a really powerful version of that people-oriented style is what's called servant leadership. This idea completely flips the traditional leadership pyramid upside down. For a servant leader, the main goal isn't to be in charge, it's to serve their team. They focus all their energy on their followers' growth and well-being. They're basically selfless, humble, ethical coaches.
Okay, so we've got the visionary and the implementer. But what about the leader who seems to just adapt to whatever situation they're in? That's our next specimen, the chameleon. This brings us to the fascinating world of situational leadership. And the core idea here is actually pretty simple, but it's also profound. It's that there is no single best way to lead. It just doesn't exist. The most effective leaders are the chameleons, the ones who can shift their style to perfectly match the needs of their team and the specific challenge in front of them.
The path goal model is a perfect way to visualize this. Think of it as a map for adaptive leaders. It shows how a leader can pick from different behaviors based on both the people they're leading and the environment they're in, all to clear the obstacles out of the way so their team can get to the goal.
This model basically hands leaders a toolkit with 4 different approaches. You can be directive when a task is confusing and your team needs clear instructions. You can be supportive when the work is stressful and people need encouragement. You can be participative when you need everyone's input and buy-in. Or you can be achievement-oriented when you've got a motivated team that's ready for a tough challenge.
Okay, so we've spent all this time talking about what leaders do, but now we're going to take a sharp turn because there's a fascinating twist to all of this. It turns out leadership isn't just about what the leader does, it's also about what we, the followers, perceive.
And this happens in 2 really interesting ways. First, we all walk around with these leadership prototypes in our heads, sort of an internal blueprint for what a leader is supposed to be. And we unconsciously judge people against that blueprint. Second, there's this thing called the romance of leadership, where we tend to give leaders way too much credit when things go well and way too much blame when they go bad. Why? Because it's a simpler story to tell ourselves.
So if we try to put our own perceptions aside for a second, are there any common traits that great leaders actually share? Well, the research points to yes. And that brings us to our final profile, the fundamental blueprint of what makes a great leader. So, what's in the blueprint? Well, effective leaders often share some personality traits, like being generally outgoing and very dependable. They also have a strong self-concept, which just means they truly see themselves as a leader. They have a genuine motivation to lead, not for power, but for the good of the group. And they have that inner drive, that tenacity to just keep pushing forward. And the list goes on with some of the things you'd probably expect. Integrity is absolutely non-negotiable. That truthfulness, that consistency between what you say and what you do. They need a deep knowledge of their business, the raw intelligence to handle complex problems, and maybe most importantly, high emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and manage their own emotions and those of the people around them. And when you take all of those attributes and put them together, you arrive at what a lot of people see as the modern ideal, authentic leadership. It's really about knowing who you are, your core values, your personality, how you see yourself, and then acting in a way that is consistent with all of that. At the end of the day, it's about being genuine. So how do you get there? How do you become more authentic? It really boils down to a 2-step process. Step 1, know yourself. That means doing some serious self-reflection, getting honest feedback, and figuring out your purpose. And then, step 2, be yourself. Stop trying to copy someone else's leadership style. Figure out your own, and make sure everything you do is anchored to your personal values. So there you have it. We've spotted the visionary, the implementer, and the chameleon. We've looked at the core blueprint of a great leader and the absolute power of being authentic. And all of that leaves us with just one final question to think about. You've seen all the models. What kind of leader will you be?